My name is Ria Calloway, 30 years old. I was clearing plates at my mother's Christmas party when Richard decided to make me furniture. The maid doesn't need to loiter, he said loudly enough to rattle Crystal. Back to the kitchen. He didn't point with a finger. He pointed with that smirk, the kind that dares the room to disagree and knows it won't. Laughter snagged on throats. A few guests looked down at their champagne. Jennifer, his daughter, covered a grin with her napkin. My mother, Susan, folded hers smaller and smaller, as if she could origami this into a harmless shape. Humiliation didn't bloom. Fire did. The plates in my hands went quiet. I set them down like they were evidence and met Richard's eyes the way you meet a dog that has learned it can bite. I didn't arrive in this room by accident. I came from a Tennessee Main Street where Mom's sewing shop smelled like steam and chalk and the metallic whir of mended things. After Dad left when I was 7, mending was our religion. We weren't poor so much as precise. Bills paid just on time, groceries with math, birthdays in the grammar of what we could manage. I folded fabric after school and learned 2 kinds of thread, the kind that holds and the kind that looks like holding until the first tug. When I was 16, money in a suit arrived with a bouquet and a promise. Richard Bennett, Chicago media king, said the word stability with a voice that expected applause. He paid off Mom's debts and installed us in a better house with a door that closed properly. He also arrived with Jennifer, 2 years younger, always camera ready, who looked at my thrift store jacket like it was a cry for help she had no intention of answering. I wanted a father. What we got was a foreman. Fetch my coffee. Clean this up. You're good at the servant stuff, he'd chuckle, and every time Mom's face would flinch so fast you could miss it if you needed to. I learned the physics of his home, men at the table, girls in motion, silence the oil that kept it all from squeaking. So I studied. I worked. I said yes to a diner shift at dawn and a library desk at noon and a waitress apron at night so I could say yes to the University of Tennessee. I taught myself to code because the logic made more sense than people. I wrote functions that returned what they promised, and for a few hours at 3 a.m., no one could call me less. After graduation, I moved to Chicago because proximity felt like a chance to be seen. Their condo was white marble and glass big enough to hold a different weather system. Richard threw parties where money made small talk with itself. When I spoke about a client campaign that paid me $5,000, he would smile and hand me a stack of plates. "Help your mother," he'd say, turning back to an audience who knew my first name, but not my existence. Jennifer would ask if my jacket still smelled like fryer oil. Mom would kiss my cheek at the door and whisper, "I'm proud of you." The words so soft they couldn't survive the hallway. It got easier to swallow until my throat learned to close itself. By December, I planned to survive the party by pretending it was a layover. Arrive, smile, depart. Then the smirk, the sentence, the room. The maid. A sentence is a cage if you let it be. I didn't. "I'm not your maid," I said. Not loud, not dramatic, just correct. He laughed to the room, that lazy wave men use to shoo gnats and women. "Just a joke, folks. Eat, drink." Conversation restarted like a playlist that had barely paused. I slipped on my coat while Mom hissed my name, the plea living behind her teeth. "Don't make a scene." I didn't. I walked out into a night so cold it tried to bargain. I drove the city like it might change its mind. My apartment smelled like lemon cleaner and resolve. I put the plates back into my own hands, in a way, opened the laptop, opened a new repository, and typed a name that felt like a dare to the part of me still asking permission. Calloway Analytics. I'd been sketching it for months in a notebook margin, an ad platform that personalized in real time, using signals most agencies couldn't parse without tripping over their own legacy software. The math said it could work. My anger said it had to. I called Lisa, my best friend since a freshman algorithms class where we learned how to turn chaos into certainty. "Tell me I'm not crazy," I said. "You're not crazy," she said. No beat, no breath. "You're late. What do you need?" Eyes on a deck, someone to kick my code, a voice when mine shakes. She laughed, and the sound turned the room warmer. "I'll be there in 20. Do not close that laptop." I didn't. I wrote the first function, the one that would decide, in a blink, which creative to serve to which human with the least guesswork and the most respect. I wrote the second, the fallback, because I know life. I titled the doc V0 Falcon because a phoenix felt 2 on the nose, but I drew one anyway in the margin. Somewhere in this city, a woman with iron in her hair was giving a talk about venture capital. I'd seen the flyer earlier that week and almost gone. Somewhere in this city, a journalist was digging for the soft rot beneath a polished brand. I didn't know their names yet. I knew mine. I wrote it at the top of the page so I could see it every time I saved. When the compile threw its first error, I didn't flinch. I fixed it. When my hands started to shake, I ate an orange over the sink and let the sugar tell my blood a better story. At 3:07 a.m., I pushed the first build, closed my eyes, and pictured Richard's smirk, folding under fluorescent office light like paper meeting rain. He wanted me back in the kitchen. I was building the whole house. I didn't quit my day job so much as I squeezed nights until they bled into morning. Code before dawn, freelance deliverables by noon, Calloway analytics in every scene between. Lisa set up camp on my sofa with a secondhand monitor and a permanent supply of gummy bears. "We are not sleeping until latency is under 80 milliseconds, she declared, mouth purple from candy. Great, I said. I wasn't using RIM anyway. We begged our first 3 clients out of a meetup, 2 scrappy e-commerce brands and a stubborn boutique gym. I offered the founders a founder's discount and a promise. Higher lift without creepy tracking. Hyper-relevance, I said, drawing a triangle on a napkin, minus the surveillance. We infer intent from context and cadence, not from stalking. The gym owner squinted. If your little triangle prints money, I'll believe in shapes. 30 days later, their signups jumped 28%. The napkin went on the office wall. Imposter syndrome is a creature that learns your schedule. Mine arrived at 2 a.m., wearing Richard's smirk. You think you can build what the big shops ship? It hissed. I answered with tests. If code is a spell, debugging is prayer. The honest kind where you admit what you don't know and ask the machine to show you. By February, Lisa had turned our mess into a story. She named modules like chapters. Falcon for decisioning, Loom for creative assembly, Lantern for analytics, and wrote a deck that made our scrappy graphs look inevitable. No more apologizing for early, she said, sliding the printed pages to me. Early is when revolutions are cheap. I circled a date in March, a Chicago tech conference I had no business affording. The badge cost $2,000 I didn't have. I put it on a card and hoped tomorrow would blink first. The venue was all matte black and promise. Founders in rented confidence pitched to investors whose shoes cost more than my laptop. I kept smoothing the sleeve of my thrift store blazer the way you pat a dog that isn't yours. Panels blurred until one didn't. A woman with silver-shot hair and a voice like clean glass took the stage. The slide behind her read, Karen Walsh, Compton Capital. She didn't sell optimism. She audited it. Capital is gasoline, she said. If your engine leaks values, congratulations. You funded a fire. People laughed, then stopped when she didn't. After her talk, I hovered with a knot of founders waiting to hand her cards. When it was my turn, I didn't give a speech. I gave a sentence. I'm building a real-time creative router that respects humans and demolishes waste, I said, breath steady, knees not. We've got 28% lift at small scale and a latency target under 60 milliamps. Karen looked at me, not through me. Send the deck, she said, sliding my card into her pocket like it had earned the ride. 2 days later, an email. Tuesday, 8 a.m. Bring numbers. I arrived 30 minutes early and sat in the lobby, pretending to reread my own slides while the receptionist's Fern judged me. Karen's office walls held no art except a whiteboard scarred with equations. She poured coffee like a ritual and opened with the kindest violence I'd ever experienced. Walk me through cost of goods, she said. I did. Churn mitigation? I showed her the cohort data. Edge cases? I admitted the brittle parts. She nodded, taking notes in a hand honed by decades of not being lied to. You're playing not to lose, she said finally. That's how smart people stall. Can the tech scale? I told her yes and how. Can you? I swallowed. With help. A corner of her mouth moved. Approval or amusement, I couldn't tell. Good. We'll mentor, not mother. I want monthly metrics, a proper cap table, and a product roadmap that reads like you plan to survive. She tapped the deck. And rename this. Calloway Analytics sounds like a law firm in grief. You're a verb. Act like it. On the train home, I scribbled in the margin of my notebook until the name felt true. Calloway stayed, but the product took the verbs root, loom, lantern. Lisa approved. If Karen's in, the sharks will circle, so let's make the water ours. The sharks did more than circle. A mid-tier agency offered to partner by rebranding us and swallowing our roadmap. I printed the email and stuck it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a tomato. Museum of Red Flags, I told Lisa. We laughed, and then we pulled another 16-hour day. We hired our first engineer, Mark Evans. Brilliant, calm, allergic to ego. He arrived with a notebook of math and a grin you could build a culture on. Your decision tree's fast, he said, scanning Falcon, but it's guessing wrong when features clash. Give me a week. On day 6, he pushed a refactor that shaved 23 MOs off our worst cases. I cried into a bagel and told him he was never allowed to leave. I'll take equity instead, he said, smiling. We shook hands on a number that felt generous and fair on both sides, which is how you know you won't hate each other later. Revenue crept from 15 to 50 to 90,000. Our stack moved from borrowed servers to something we could squint at and call infrastructure. Sharon, my bookkeeper turned part-time CFO, nagged me into payroll and benefits. If you want adults, pay like one, she said, and I stopped arguing. Meanwhile, Bennett Media's campaigns began showing up in our competitive teardowns looking tired. Big spend, low precision. The kind of work that wins awards because it knows someone on the jury. I watched a pre-roll they ran for a luxury car, 30 seconds that didn't know it was interrupting a recipe video. They're buying reach and calling it relevance, Lisa said, clicking through the sad metrics. I imagined Richard in a meeting, dismissing some junior who pointed to the numbers. Old empires don't notice leaks until their socks are wet. March bled into April. Karen's calendar invites arrived like clockwork. Review, reality check, fix. She killed pet features with a surgeon's mercy. Shiny as a tax, she said. Pay it only when the revenue can file the receipt. She made me practice power in small ways. Send a hard email, set a price without apologizing, tell a maybe to wait for yes. You want to be trusted with scale? She asked. Behave like somebody's already watching. At night, the city hummed under my windows, and I built a habit of standing there before bed, looking at the glass-stacked skyline and reminding myself that buildings are just decisions piled high and held together by standards. Mom called sometimes. I let it go to voicemail when I wasn't ready to hear the cotton in her voice. Come by Sunday, she'd say. Richard's grilling. The smell of lemon cleaner crept in behind her words. I texted back 3 dots and nothing more. On a rainy Thursday, I found myself at a small founder dinner Karen hosted in the back room of a restaurant that smelled like confidence and butter. Halfway through the second course, a woman slid into the empty chair beside me, shaking water from a trench coat that had seen things. Rebecca Hull, she said, offering a hand and a smile that didn't beg to be liked. I write about what cracks when you tap the marble. Journalist? I asked. Archaeologist, she corrected. My fossils just have NDAs. She asked what I was building. I told her, careful, but not coy. She listened the way good reporters do, like she was paying me. Interesting, she said at last. You know Bennett Media? My pulse stuttered under the table. Too well. Rebecca's smile thinned. They look shiny on stage. Backstage smells like smoke. She slid a card across the linen. If you ever want to talk about saving a house before it burns, call. I tucked the card into my notebook beside the phoenix doodle, heart climbing my throat. Outside, rain hammered the awning, insistent. Inside, the lights were warm and the knives were clean. I excused myself, washed my hands, and looked in the mirror for a beat longer than vanity requires. The maid doesn't loiter, Richard's voice offered up from the past. Neither do owners, I answered, drying my hands. When I rejoined the table, Karen raised an eyebrow, like a question I wouldn't have to answer yet. I raised my glass anyway. To engines that don't leak, I said. And to gasoline used wisely, she finished, clinking. The room's talk rolled on, plates cleared, new courses arrived, and I felt something click in my chest. Not rage, not even relief. Alignment. The weapon I was building wasn't for spectacle, it was for standards. Richard's world ran on volume. Mine would run on precision. By midnight, back at my desk, Falcon hummed. Loom stitched creatives like a kind tailor. lantern through dashboards that told the truth even when it hurt. I pushed a new build, wrote a line in my notebook, practice power kindly, and underlined it twice. The city exhaled. I did too. Karen always said, every empire looks polished from the sidewalk. Step inside and you'll hear the termites. 2 months after that dinner, I started hearing them. Not in my company. Ours was lean, humming, alive. But in the name, I couldn't stop orbiting. Bennett Media Solutions. Richard's pride, Jennifer's playground, Mom's gilded cage. Rebecca Hull's card had lived in my notebook for weeks, tucked beside the Phoenix sketch. I wasn't planning to call. I didn't want to be the kind of person who fought back with gossip. But the same week our platform hit its first six-figure revenue, an alert popped up on one of our data feeds. Bennett Media's campaigns had quietly dropped off 3 major clients. Their ad impressions tanked. No press release, no noise, just silence where there used to be swagger. Lisa noticed it too. They're losing accounts, she said, clicking through analytics dashboards. Look, these brands pivoted to in-house tools or smaller firms. She paused, turning to me. You don't think... I think termites, I said softly. That night, at 11:14 p.m., I texted Rebecca. Still curious about those cracks in the marble? She called within 5 minutes. You've got timing, Calloway, she said, voice dry as newsprint. Meet me tomorrow. Bring curiosity and plausible deniability. We met at a diner that looked allergic to Wi-Fi. She slid a USB drive across the Formica like it was nothing. Internal reports. Source stays anonymous. Audit trails, loan memos, email threads. Bennett's bleeding money and covering it with creative accounting. I didn't touch the drive right away. Why give it to me? Because I've seen women like you, she said. You don't burn houses for revenge. You rebuild on the ashes. Maybe this time, someone worth something should own the match. Her words settled somewhere behind my ribs, hot and steady. At home, I plugged in the drive. The files opened like trapdoors. Quarterly reports buried in red ink. Consultant invoices marked confidential. Emails between Richard and board members fretting over temporary liquidity issues. Temporary like a broken dam. They were hiding a $10 million loss. I sat back, staring at the numbers, until the digits blurred. Part of me wanted to shut the laptop and pretend I hadn't seen them. Another part, the Tennessee part, the girl who stitched torn hems for pennies, recognized a pattern. This was power in freefall, and power like that takes anyone it can grab on the way down. I called Karen the next morning. Send me the files, she said without hesitation. An hour later, she called back. It's real. Ugly, but real. If this leaks, Bennett's stock collapses. If someone buys it quietly and restructures, it survives, and whoever buys it owns the bones of a giant. You're saying we could buy them? I'm saying you could, through a front, if we move fast. My stomach flipped. Richard would never... He won't know, she cut in. We set up a holding company, Phoenix Partners. I'll fund the seed. You raise $5 million. On paper, it's my deal. In practice, you'll control operations. Legal, clean, and poetic. Phoenix, I repeated, almost laughing. I drew one months ago. Karen chuckled. Then maybe you were listening to the universe. The next weeks blurred into spreadsheets, investor calls, and caffeine that tasted like ambition. Lisa crafted a pitch deck that could charm a cynic, an ad tech integration of precision and scale. Mark modeled server loads and predicted we could absorb Bennett's clients within 3 months. I pitched to rooms full of skeptical men in suits who looked at my hands before my slides. Some smiled too long. Some interrupted halfway through. But Karen sat behind me in every meeting, arms crossed, the gravity in the room bending toward her. When I finished my final pitch, she simply said, "She's the future of this industry." We raised $5.2 million. Phoenix Partners was born on a Tuesday morning with 2 signatures and a handshake. Karen wired her own $10 million as anchor capital. The acquisition plan was delicate, a $35 million buyout structured as a rescue. Publicly, Bennett Media would be absorbed by Phoenix, a neutral venture, while retaining its name and staff. Privately, I'd oversee integration through Calloway Analytics. Timing is key, Karen said. They're one bad quarter away from panic. We swoop in as saviors, not scavengers. Mom called that night while I was coding. I almost didn't answer, but her voice cracked through my guard. Richard says you've been busy, she said carefully. He misses seeing you. Does he? I asked, letting the silence stretch. She hesitated. He says you're talented. Maybe you could come to dinner, talk about opportunities. Opportunities. The word tasted metallic. Tell him I'm building my own, I said. He'll hear about it soon enough. Ria, please don't. I'm not starting a fight, Mom, I said softly. I'm finishing one. A week later, Rebecca emailed one line. Bennett board meeting scheduled Friday. They're desperate for a cash infusion. Karen's voice on the phone was calm steel. That's our window. The following 48 hours were a blur of signatures, encrypted transfers, and midnight calls. Phoenix Partners bought out Bennett's majority shares before sunrise Saturday. Legally airtight, publicly invisible. When the deal closed, Karen sent me a single text. Welcome to the empire. Try not to gloat. I didn't sleep that night. My laptop glowed with numbers that now belonged to me. Somewhere across the city, Richard probably slept soundly, thinking the storm had passed. He had no idea that by Monday, the daughter he mocked at every dinner would own the company he worshipped. And by Friday, he'd be reporting to me. The rot in his marble palace wasn't invisible anymore. It had a new architect, one who knew exactly where to rebuild. Monday came dressed in glass and arrogance. Bennett Media's headquarters gleamed like every photo Richard had ever posted. Skyline reflections, brushed steel, too much echo. I'd memorized that building from years of visits when I'd pretend not to notice how employees looked through me. This time, I carried a different name on the visitor badge. Phoenix Partners, Strategic Consultant. My palms were damp, but my pulse steady. Karen had warned me, power isn't about loudness, it's about who can stay calm longest. At 8:55 a.m., the elevator opened onto the top floor. The boardroom stretched wall to wall in glass, the lake glinting behind it like something that couldn't drown. Richard sat at the head of the table, cufflinks gleaming, the same smirk he'd worn at that Christmas party years ago still carved into his face. Jennifer, beside him, in cream silk and disinterest. Sarah, excuse me, Ms. Calloway, Richard said, drawing out the formality until it soured. This is a closed session. I'm sure the receptionist can show you. I'm supposed to be here. I laid a folder on the table, the contract embossed with Phoenix Partners logo. As of this morning, we hold majority ownership of Bennett Media Solutions. The room stilled, pens stopped, chairs creaked. Someone coughed to fill the silence. Richard laughed, but it came out uneven. This is a joke. It's a transaction, I said, sliding the signed pages across the table. Finalized Saturday. The board approved a private equity rescue to offset quarterly losses. Karen Walsh executed the buyout. You're with Karen? He sputtered. I am Karen's operational partner, I said. Effective immediately, Bennett Media Solutions reports to Phoenix Partners. And as Phoenix's operating director, that means you'll report to me. A single laugh broke from somewhere down the table. Nervous. Too quick. Jennifer's chair scraped back. This is insane, she snapped. Dad, stop her. Richard skimmed the documents, his face tightening with every page. The flush that started at his collar crept up like something venomous. You don't know what you're doing, he said finally, low and trembling. This company's my legacy. No, I said quietly. It's your mess. I'm the cleanup crew. One of the senior board members, a silver-haired woman named Ellen, cleared her throat. Ms. Calloway, if Phoenix Partners now holds controlling shares, we'll need to confirm your strategic plan. I clicked open my laptop, projecting slides. Mitchell Analytics, now integrated under Phoenix, has generated $150,000 in new client revenue this quarter alone. Our tech will replace Bennett's outdated ad-serving system and reduce cost per campaign by 30%. Staff retention and workflow revisions will follow. Jennifer muttered, You're just showing off graphs. I'm showing survival, I said, flipping to the next slide, projected growth curve. The numbers glowed in the room's cold light. Richard stood so suddenly his chair screeched. This is a stunt. You think you can humiliate me? This child of a seamstress? Careful, I said, the word calm but slicing through the room. You don't have to respect me, but you will respect the position that now keeps this company alive. For the first time I saw it, fear dressed up as fury. The same look I'd seen in customers when Mom refused to lower her prices, people who couldn't stand that they'd underestimated someone. Ellen turned to me. Do you intend to retain Mr. Bennett's position? Yes, I said, and Richard's eyebrows twitched up, but with revised responsibilities. I slid a single sheet forward. Effective immediately. Richard Bennett will serve as executive advisor to the integration department reporting to me. His experience remains valuable, but oversight and final approval now pass through Phoenix management. Advisor? He repeated, voice raw. It's a dignified way to stay on payroll, I said. You should thank Karen for that. A few board members tried and failed to hide smiles. Jennifer slammed her notebook shut. You can't do this to him. Jennifer, Ellen said softly. She already has. The meeting ended in an awkward shuffle of papers and polite murmurs. When the last member left, only Richard and I remained. He didn't look up. You planned this. For years, I said. Ever since you told me I was good at being a servant. He barked out a laugh, but it cracked halfway through. You think you've won? I didn't come here to win, I said, gathering my laptop. I came here to rebuild something worth keeping. He glared, voice low. You'll crash it in a year. You'll learn why people like me run things. People like you? I met his gaze. People like you build walls around your power and call it wisdom. People like me learn to climb. I turned to go. And Richard... He froze. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., I'll expect your daily briefing. Don't be late. His mouth opened, but no words came. Outside, the Chicago wind caught my coat and flung it wide like wings. That evening, Mom called. Ria? Her voice trembled. Richard came home early. He's upset. What happened? I hesitated. He finally met his boss. Your boss? No, Mom. I took a slow breath. Me. Silence, then softly. You really did it. I told you I would. She started to cry. Not the dramatic kind, just quiet, exhausted sounds. I should have stood up for you back then. I closed my eyes. You were surviving. So was I. Maybe now we both get to live. By morning, Bennett Media's building felt different. Colder, maybe, or cleaner. I walked past reception, badge now permanent. The guard nodding like he knew the story but wouldn't say. Richard was already at the conference table, suit impeccable, smile practiced. Good morning, Ms. Calloway, he said. There it was, the line I'd dreamed of hearing, not because it meant victory, but because it meant balance. Morning, Richard, I replied, taking my seat. He looked away first. 6 months later, Chicago looked smaller from the airplane window, a grid of glass and arrogance, neatly boxed behind me. I'd moved to Seattle with the sunrise, trading skyline steel for gray-blue water and the hush of fir trees. My new office sat high enough above Puget Sound that the city felt like a distant rumor. Callaway Analytics, once a name scribbled beside a Phoenix doodle, was now a company with a pulse. 50 employees, clients in 4 countries, revenue crossing 2 million. We'd stopped being the underdog, we were the blueprint. Lisa, now chief marketing officer, kicked her boots onto my office coffee table. We should celebrate. I booked the rooftop bar for tonight. Nothing corporate, just us. You're buying, of course. I smiled. I'll allow it. She grinned. You always were generous once you won the world. Not the world, I said. Just the piece of it that told me I couldn't have one. Bennett Media, under Phoenix control, had stabilized. The numbers looked honest now. No hidden debts, no phantom clients. We'd merged their best creatives into our team, cleaned house where rot clung too deep. The company Richard once ruled by fear was humming under fairness and precision. I'd implemented a respect clause in every contract. No one would ever be talked down to in that building again, not even the interns. Richard stayed on as executive advisor, though the title had become ceremonial. He showed up every morning at 8 o'clock sharp, eyes down, voice measured. Good morning, Ms. Calloway, he'd say, and I'd answer with the same even tone. Sometimes I wondered if he heard the echo of that night years ago. The maid doesn't need to stand here. Every time he said, good morning, it sounded like an apology disguised as routine. Jennifer, his daughter, didn't last long after the takeover. She sent one furious email accusing me of destroying her family, then vanished from the company directory. I heard through colleagues that she'd started freelancing, branding work, small projects. A month ago, one of our junior analysts forwarded me a pitch deck Jennifer had made. It wasn't bad. Her tagline even used a phrase I'd written once, build what they can't ignore. I smiled, deleted the email, and wished her luck. Mom was harder. At first, she didn't call. Then, once a month, she'd leave voicemails that started as updates and ended as regret. Richard's quieter these days, she'd say softly. He's humbled, I think. I miss you, honey. I hope you're eating well. I never knew how to respond. Forgiveness isn't a door you walk through once. It's a hallway you keep passing by, sometimes stopping to peek inside. I'd written her letters instead, unsent drafts, saved in a folder named Later. Letters that said things like, I understand why you stayed, and you should have protected me, but I'm protecting myself now. I didn't hate her, I just didn't know how to let her back in. Karen, meanwhile, had become more than a mentor. She was the lighthouse, sharp, unsentimental, always seeing storms before I did. At our quarterly review, she poured coffee and said, You've built a machine that runs without you. That's rare. I'm not done, I said. Good, she replied, because comfort is how people rot. What's next? I showed her the slides for the Calloway Foundation, a nonprofit arm funding first-generation founders from small towns like mine. We'll give grants, mentorship, not loans, no interest, no humiliation, just a start. Karen smiled, the closest she came to pride. That's legacy, not revenge. Maybe both, I admitted. Fine line, she said, raising her cup. Stay on the right side of it. By fall, the foundation had funded 10 startups, hairdressers building booking apps, farmers developing inventory systems, a teenager from rural Kentucky designing eco-packaging. I watched their eyes light up when they realized someone believed in them, and I saw pieces of myself at every table. At the launch gala, I stood beneath the lights and told the story, not sanitized, but deliberate. I was called a maid at a Christmas party, I said, voice clear, and I decided never again to be furniture in someone else's house. But this isn't about revenge. It's about inheritance, the kind you build, not the kind you're given. The room went still, the kind of stillness that means someone's listening. Your worth doesn't come from who recognizes it, I continued. It comes from what you build when no one's watching. Applause rose like rain. Lisa whistled from the back. I caught Karen's approving nod and let myself breathe. That night, standing by the window as the city lights shimmered, I thought about Tennessee, about the hum of Mom's sewing machine, the ache in her shoulders, the little girl who used to stitch torn hems and dream of owning something no one could take. Maybe this was the real inheritance, not money, not companies, but the stubborn will to rebuild what others tried to break. 2 weeks later, a package arrived at the office. No sender name. Inside was a photo of Mom and me from years ago, her arms around me at my high school graduation, pride soft in her eyes. Beneath it, a note in her handwriting. I'm sorry for every time I looked away. You were never invisible. Love, Mom. I didn't cry. I just sat there for a long time, the paper trembling in my hands. Then I picked up my phone and typed, Dinner this weekend? My treat. 3 dots appeared. Then, I'd love that, sweetheart. I set the phone down and looked out the window at the rain. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to win. I'd already inherited everything that mattered. My name, my peace, my story, and the power to decide how it ends. The dinner with Mom happened on a Sunday in a quiet restaurant by the pier, white tablecloths, low music, a view of the water folding itself into twilight. I'd chosen a corner table, half hidden behind ferns. When she walked in, she looked smaller than I remembered, not fragile, just lighter, like someone who'd finally put down something heavy. Ria, she said softly, you look different. Good different? She smiled. Peaceful. We sat. For a while, we didn't talk about the past. We talked about the food, the weather, how Seattle rain feels different from Tennessee storms. Then the pauses grew honest. I saw you on that video, she said finally, the foundation speech. Her eyes glistened. You said it wasn't about revenge. I hope that's true. It used to be, I admitted. At first, all I wanted was to make Richard choke on his arrogance. But when I got there, when I stood in that boardroom, I realized I didn't need him to see me anymore. I just needed to see myself. She nodded slowly, hands twisting the edge of her napkin. I should have stopped him. That night. Every night. I was scared, Ria. Scared of losing what little stability we had. I know, I said. You thought survival meant silence, but silence has a cost, Mom. We both paid it. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She didn't hide them this time. Do you hate me? No, I said truthfully. But I had to stop needing you to protect me before I could forgive you for not doing it. That broke her. She reached across the table, her hand trembling. I let her take mine. It didn't feel like surrender. It felt like balance. When we left, she hugged me so tightly my breath caught. You really did build a better life, she whispered. So did you, I said. You got out. She blinked. Out? I know you left him, Mom. Rebecca mentioned it months ago. The divorce filing. I didn't say anything because I wanted it to be your story, not part of mine. She smiled through the tears. He told me I'd regret it. But for the first time in 30 years, I wake up without bracing for someone's voice. That's worth more than his money. Good, I said, meaning it. We both built something from the same ashes. A month later, I flew to Chicago for a quarterly check-in at Bennett Media. The building hadn't changed much, still the same glass arrogance, but the air inside felt different, warmer. People smiled now. The receptionist greeted me by name, not with polite confusion. Richard was in the conference room when I walked in. Thinner, grayer, still proud, but in the way a cracked statue stands, because it doesn't know how to fall. Good morning, Ms. Calloway, he said, voice tight but steady. Morning, Richard. We reviewed numbers, contracts, staffing updates. He was competent, focused. When the meeting ended, he lingered. I heard about your foundation, he said. Good work. Thank you. He hesitated. I was wrong about you. I met his gaze. You were wrong about a lot of people. He nodded once. That's fair. There was a pause, one of those long silences that stretch like bridges. Then he said quietly, Susan left me. I know. She said she wanted peace. She deserves it. He looked at me for a long time, then nodded. So do you. For the first time, I didn't see him as the man who humiliated me. Just as a man who'd built his walls so high he forgot how to leave them. I didn't forgive him aloud. Some things don't need to be spoken to be finished. That evening, I sat in a hotel bar overlooking the river, laptop open, drafting an essay for the foundation's site. Power isn't the opposite of humility. It's the practice of choice. The hardest boundary you'll ever build is the one that lets you stay kind without being small. When I finished, I stared out the window. The city shimmered in its own reflection. Skyscrapers bleeding into water. Lisa called from Seattle, her voice bright. Board approved the new partnership. Congrats, boss. I'm not a boss, I said, smiling. I'm a builder. You're both, she said, and I'm proud of you. After the call, I walked outside. Chicago wind, still sharp, carried the scent of rain. I passed the old Bennett building one last time. Inside, lights glowed. Someone's late meeting, someone's ambition, someone's second chance. I didn't need to look up. I'd already been here long enough to know that view. Back in Seattle, dawn crept through my loft, streaking the walls with pale gold. I made coffee, opened the window, and breathed in the salt air. My phone buzzed with new messages. Clients, reporters, foundation updates. I silenced them all. For once, I let quiet win. I looked at the framed photo on my desk, Mom and me from that graduation day, the one she'd mailed back. Next to it, the tiny Phoenix doodle, taped from that first notebook. I smiled. The maid became the maker. The girl who used to sew other people's hems now stitched together her own horizon. The world hadn't turned fair. I had just stopped asking permission for space inside it. And sometimes that's the only miracle you need.